Gramma. George's mother went to the door, stopped there, came back and touched George's hair. I don't want you to worry, she said. You will be all right. And Grandma too. Sure, I will be okay. George smiled. George, are you sure? Are you sure about what? Are you sure that you are not scared to be alone with Grandma? Was that what she was going to ask? If it was, the answer is no. After all, he wasn't 6 anymore. When they had first come here to take care of Grandma, and he had cried with terror whenever Grandma had wanted to hold him. She held his brother Buddy, and Buddy was alive. But Buddy was 2 years older. Now Buddy had broken his leg and was at the hospital in Lewiston. I will be fine. Tell Buddy to stay cool. You have got the doctor's number. If something goes wrong. Right, right, he said. He smiled. Did the smile look okay? Sure, sure it did. He wasn't scared of Grandma anymore. Mom was going to the hospital to see Buddy, and he was just going to stay here and be cool. No problem. Mom went to the door again. If she walks up and asks for her tea, I know, George said. He saw how scared and worried she was. She was worried about Buddy. I know all that. Mom, go. You are a good boy, George. Don't be scared. You are not scared of Grandma anymore, are you? No, George said. He smiled. Tell Buddy that I'm sorry, that he broke his leg. I will, she said. She smiled too, but her smile was sad. A woman of about 50 with two sons, one 13, one 11, and no man. And remember Dr. Erlander. Sure, he said, you'd better go now. She will probably sleep the whole time. Mom said, I love you, George. You are a good son. She closed the door behind her. George went to the window and watched her get into their old car. Now she looked so sick, so worried. George felt bad for her. If Mom wasn't so worried and scared, George would have been almost happy. He didn't feel bad for Buddy, who liked to tease him. Broken leg weren't a big problem. On the contrary, George was looking forward to some temporary peace and quiet around the house. But now he was alone in the house with Grandma. George walked across the small kitchen. There was a phone on the wall, and next to it was a board with Dr. Erlander's phone number, 681 4330. Mom hadn't written the number there just today, because she had to go to Buddy. It had been there almost 3 weeks now, because Grandma was having her bad spells again. George picked up the phone and listened. He just wanted to check if the phone was working. It was. Grandma was noisy when she had her bad spells, but mostly she just lay in the bed. She had been in for 3 years, a fat old woman in diapers under her nightgown. Her face was wrinkled, and her eyes were empty and blind. At first, Grandma hadn't been blind, but now she had gone totally blind, and she needed two people to help her go to the bathroom. In those days, 5 years ago, Grandma had weighed over 200 pounds. Once she wanted a hug, and Buddy, then it, had hugged her. George hadn't, but I'm not scared now, he told himself, walking across the kitchen back to the table. Not a bit. She was just an old lady who has bad spells sometimes. He filled the kettle with water and put it on the stove. He got a teacup and put one of Grandma's special herbal tea bags into it, in case she woke up and wanted a cup. He hoped that she wouldn't. because then he would have to sit next to her and give her the tea, looking at her toothless mouth and listening to the sounds she would make, and her blind eyes would look at you. He ought to go in and check on her, but he didn't want to. I am not afraid of Grandma, he thought. If she wouldn't hug now, I'd go right to her and let her hug me because she's just an old lady. She's senile, and that's why she has bad spells. That's all. I will let her hug me and not cry, just like Buddy. He walked to the door of Grandma's room and looked in. There lay Grandma, sleeping, her toothless mouth open. She's rising so slowly that you had to look hard to make sure she wasn't dead. Oh God, what if she dies while Mom's at the hospital? She won't. She won't. Yeah, but what if she does? One of Grandma's hand moved slightly. George went back into the kitchen to check the time. Maybe Mom would be back soon. He looked at the clock and was shocked to see that only 20 minutes had passed. Mom wouldn't even get to the city yet. He stood still, listening to the silence. He could hear the refrigerator noise and the clock. He sat down and ate a cookie. He thought of turning on the TV and watching something, but he was afraid. The sound would wake up Grandma, and she would begin calling, Ruth, Ruth. Bring me some tea. Tea, Rose. Once again, George told himself not to be so scared. She was an old lady, lying in bed. She couldn't get up and hurt him. And she was 83 years old. And she wasn't going to die this afternoon. George walked over and picked up the phone again, then put it back. After that, he walked to the sideboard, took out his history book, sat down at the kitchen table, and began to read. But he couldn't concentrate on it. He got up again and went to the door of Grandma's room again. Her hand was still Grandma slept, and her face was gray. To George, she didn't look like a person who was old and ready to die. She didn't look peaceful. She looked crazy and dangerous. George remembered very well how they had come here to take care of Grandma when Grandpa died. Grandpa was some years younger than Grandma, a carpenter, and he had worked right until the day of his death. It had been a heart attack. Even then, Grandma had been getting senile, having her bad spells. She had always been a problem for her family. She was a stern woman who had taught at school for 15 years between having babies and getting in flights with the charge. She and Grandma and their 9 children went too. Mom said that Grandpa and Grandma quit the charge. At the same time, Grandpa decided to quit teaching. But once, about a year ago, when Aunt Flo came for a visit, George and Buddy heard quite a different story. Grandpa and Grandma had been kicked out of the charge, and Grandma had been fired from her job because she did something wrong. It was something about book, why or how someone could be fired from their job and kicked off the charge just because of books. George didn't understand, so he asked Buddy about it. There were different kinds of book. Buddy said, yeah, but what kind? How should I know? But why did Mom tell us that Grandma quit the charge and her job? Because it's a family secret, that's why. Now, leave me alone. George had thought about it for a long time, and finally, about a month after Aunt Flo had left, he went to his mother and asked her. When he asked Mom, she had sat silent for a long time, And then she began talking. Maybe it's time for you to know now. She had said, lying is bad. And we all lie to our children about Gramma. And we lie to ourselves too. I guess most of the time we do. So his mom told him that after Grandpa and Grandma had got married, they had a baby that was born dead. And a year later, they had another baby that was born dead too. And the doctor told Grandma that she would never have a healthy baby and that her babies would be born dead or would die as soon as they were born. And that would go on, he said, until it killed her too. Soon the box began. But Mom didn't say what kind of box they were, or where Grandma got them, or how she used them. Grandma got pregnant again, and this time the baby wasn't born dead, and the baby didn't die afterwards. This time the baby was fine, and that was George's uncle Larson. And after that, Grandma got pregnant and had babies many times. Once Mom said Grandpa had tried to make her get rid of the box, and Grandma wouldn't. George asked his mother why, and she said, I think that by then the books were as important to her as her babies. All I know for sure is that those books had some power over her. George closed his history book and looked at the clock. It was almost 5. He realized suddenly and with something. I like or that if Mom wasn't home by 6 or so, Grandma would wake up and start asking for her supper. George looked out the window. If Buddy hadn't broken his leg, Mom wouldn't be here now, making something for supper, and they would be talking and laughing, and maybe they had play cards later on. He thought about Grandma some years ago, sitting in her chair like a big fat worm in a dress, and him hiding behind his mom, crying, Send him to me, Ross. I want to hug him. He's a little frightened, Mom. He will come in time. But his mother was frightened too. Come in, Ross. Send him here. I want to give him a hug. No, he's crying. Mom had been born in 1930, followed by Aunt Flo in 1932, and then Uncle Frankel in 1934. Uncle Frankel had died in 1948 because of appendicitis. So Grandma had her babies and taught school, and the doctors were totally surprised. And Grandma worked and got more and more well off, even during the Depression. And at last people began to talk. They said that Grandma and Grandpa were too lucky for ordinary people, and it was just after that that the books had been found. Mom wouldn't say more than that, except that the school had found some and that a herdsman had found some more. There had been a big scandal. Grandpa and Grandma had moved to another town. That was the end of it. The children had grown up and had children of their own. When Grandpa had his heart attack, no one wanted to put the old lady in a nursing home. And Grandma didn't want to do a thing like that either. The old lady wanted to go to one of her children and live the rest of her years with the child. But they were all married. None of them wanted to share their home with a senile and unpleasant old woman. All were married except Rose, whose husband died in a car accident. So George's mom was the one to take care of the old lady. George knew that Mom had agreed to do it because everyone in the big family had told her that Grandma couldn't possibly live long. She had too many things wrong with her: high blood pressure, obesity, heart problems. It would be 8 months. Aunt Flo and Aunt Stephen and Uncle George all said a year at the most. But now it had been 5 years, and that was long. George suddenly remembered one conversation he had heard years ago. His mom was talking to Uncle George. She's more dangerous now that she's senile, Uncle George said. George, be quiet. The boys can hear us. You know what I mean. You remember what happened to Franklin when he made her angry? George, be quiet. Well, she didn't really mean to do it. George, shut up. He was all prepared. The tea was ready on the stove. If Grandma wanted that, he could make tea, or he could make dinner. If Grandma woke up and yelled for it, Dr. Allander's number was on the board. In case of an emergency, everything was cool. So what was he worried about?